Hi there, it's Gabriel Tan talking Asian football once again with Rish Roshan right now. Roshan, we are looking still at the Asian qualifiers, the third round now, and it's match day two now. Obviously a lot has happened on match day one in terms of setting the stage, but there's plenty that could be changed at the conclusion of match day two. Now we've looked at, we want to look at Australia and Vietnam because this was an Australian side. It's a difficult group, but they passed their first test with flying colors, beating China 3-0, while Vietnam, they had a great start against Saudi Arabia, scoring early on, but then fell to a 3-1 loss. So, in terms of where this game could go, it could be really crucial for Australia and really, consolidating that place in the top two of the group. But, Vietnam also need a win now. I think on paper, we can both agree Australia will be the favorites for this one. And, we've always seen, Southeast Asian teams kind of struggle with really strong, physically imposing sides. So, do Vietnam, what's the plan for Vietnam? Is there any way they can nullify the threat of Australia? I mean, I just want to paint the picture here. Harry Suter leading the goals for Australia in this tournament. He's a centre back. He's 1.98 meters tall. I don't think anyone in the Vietnam side is up to his shoulder even. So, what will the game plan be for Vietnam?
And he should be like with the Australian Boomers or something instead of the Socceroos. That's not an insult, by the way. The Boomers are the basketball team. In case anyone out there thinks I'm throwing out an insult. No, but look, he's been class, and it's not just his qualities in the air. I mean, obviously a big threat in those set piece situations, but I think at the back as well, his reading of the game, the way he sort of gets them playing at times from those positions as well. I think he's been fantastic for them in central defense. And I mean, you're quite right to bring out the difference in the physicality or in the sizes of the players and things like that. But I mean, that's always going to be there. For a Southeast Asian side, that there's always going to be that difference. And I know that people out there will say, yeah, Australia are a Southeast Asian side as well. Not really. I mean, they're part of the AFF. Yeah, I accept that, but it's quite different, isn't it? I mean, Australians have players playing in Europe and things like that. Whereas with the Vietnamese team, it's mostly domestic-based players. And look, there's not much you can do in terms of that genetics front, right? Yep. You have certain tools that work for you, and you've got to find a key to do that. And I think what Vietnam have is a very good tactician in Park Hang-seo, and his ability to find a way to play against some of these big sides. And we've seen them at youth level, at the AFC Under-23 Championships. And of course, coming into senior level, it's a different story. I accept that. But we've also seen progression from Vietnam on the senior international stage. They had a very good Asian Cup in 2019. I think they put in strong performances. And I don't think they ever really overawed. We saw them in that game against Saudi Arabia, for example. Again, a side you could say are perhaps bigger, stronger than Vietnam physically. And I think Vietnam held their own for a long while until, of course, Zoi Man got himself sent off. Then it was always going to be very difficult for them. There are 2 penalties in that game as well, going the way of Saudi Arabia. But the thing I like about this Vietnam side as well is their tactical discipline and the knowledge and the understanding that yes, we have these differences when we're coming up against the big guns in Asia, physical, size-wise, whatever you want to call it, speed-wise, whatever it is. But we can sort of try and counteract that with setting ourselves up a certain way, and they set themselves up defensively to be very sound, very compact, and then hitting on the counter-attack. But Vietnam also have wonderfully gifted technical players who we've seen them in certain phases of possession play where they can keep the ball, they can pass it through the lines, and then they can break forward in those areas. So I don't think Vietnam have actually let anyone down. And yes, there are all these concerns, but I think they're a side who are capable of sort of dealing with these threats because of the man that Park Hang-seo is in terms of being very meticulous, very detailed, and because of the ability of the players to take on board and accept those decisions and work together as a unit, work together as a team. Specifically, dealing with the threats at those set pieces. Try not to give away too many corners. Try not to give away too many free kicks in dangerous areas. Try not to defend too deep and have crosses coming into those positions. But otherwise, there are ways around it. If a corner comes in, for example, you can have 2 men marking Suta, for example, or just making sure that you're there as a distraction. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to win the ball in a challenge. You just need to make sure you're there, throw in a challenge, make a nuisance of himself, make sure he doesn't have a clear header at goal. But look, this is the level that Vietnam are playing at. They've given themselves an opportunity to test themselves against Asia's big guns once again, and a chance at perhaps, I don't expect them to qualify for the World Cup, but if you're in there, you still have an opportunity. Even if it's 1%, you still have a chance in there. But look, in terms of the overall development, it's great to see them playing at this stage of the competition and testing themselves against the big boys, because that's going to help their development overall, Gabe.
Roshan, I want to ask you this question now because you're a former professional footballer. You would be the best person to answer this, or at least between the two of us. But we talk about match fitness. We talk about players. When you're playing 90 minutes, the win is enough motivation to last you through the game. You don't stop running. But I want to talk a bit about this conditioning because the Vietnamese V League has not been. It's been on a hiatus due to COVID since I think it's the start of May now. So we have training camps for the Vietnamese team. I'm sure they can run for 90 minutes, but in terms of match fitness, that's always slightly different. Do you see this being a negative for Vietnam? And the first game against Saudi, adrenaline maybe could have gotten them through that 90 minutes, but backing that up a few days later, is this a concern for you for the Vietnamese team?
It's a valid question to ask, Gabe, and it's definitely something that has a place in the game in terms of when you're thinking about this. And even recovery for Australia was spoken about by Graham Arnold, saying that, now we've got that game against China, absolutely fantastic. We were dominant. They were brilliant. They could have scored more than 3 goals, I think. Yep. They were class. And you touched on conditioning. And I think it showed in that game, in the sense that these players were just absolutely flying. Having had pre-seasons with their clubs in Europe, perhaps, coming into this campaign, playing matches in the leagues. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Rogic, for example, looked outstanding. He had such a big impact for Australia in those attacking midfield positions, drifting across those midfield areas, linking the play for them. And then you had that forward line of Boyle, Mabil, and Taggart. Great mobility in those areas as well, and plenty of speed. And what they can do for me, Australia, is the way that they play tactically. I like how they're flexible. Okay, they're good in possession. They can pass it out through the line, through the back. But at times, if you go back and look at the highlights of that game against China as well, or watch even the match even better, you will see these diagonal runs from the likes of Boyle, Mabil, and then longer balls being played over the top out from central defense. So that's something Vietnam will have to address as well. Just make sure the defenders don't get dragged out by the movement of Taggart, who might drop deep, or if it's Mitch Duke, for example, dropping into those deeper areas, and then perhaps Mabil and Boyle making those run-ins behind the defense. A little bit like what Liverpool used to do. With Firmino dropping, and then you had Mane and Salah in those areas. And Graham Arnold has spoken about studying Liverpool's game, so perhaps that's something he's picked up on as well. So, the conditioning question, it definitely has validity to it. But from the point of view of Vietnam, I guess what you'd be saying to them is, listen, guys, what an opportunity this is. We're in the stage that we are at the moment. Give absolutely everything, and then after that, you go for a bit of a break. This is just the last game before the next round of qualifiers. We're playing at home, so hopefully that sort of adjustment for Vietnam isn't as big as it would necessarily be away from home for them. So look, I'm expecting a keenly contested match. Australia will dominate possession. Vietnam will try and be defensively as compact and as deep as they possibly can, invite the pressure, and then look to try and hit on the break. And I'm fascinated to see how they get on in a real big test for them. Saudi Arabia, as you mentioned, now Australia, 2 huge matches, 2 big teams in AFC qualifying. So I'm really excited actually for Vietnam rather than fearful.
I think you're right there, Rosh. I mean, as entering the campaign as the lowest ranked team of the 12, I think every game is going to be a tough one for Vietnam. But, you did mention we don't expect Vietnam to get to the World Cup. I think, but, they can be so proud of what they've achieved already and are going on to achieve. I just want to, if you had to put a line through what would be a pass mark, I mean, obviously, if they go on to lose every game, that would still be disappointing, even if it may not be unexpected. But, what do you think would be, we can classify as a pass mark for Vietnam? It's still a long way to go, but, at the end of this third round.
I probably look at how Thailand did in qualifying in 2018 and maybe gauge it against that. Thailand, I think they didn't win any games. No. They had 2 draws, 8 defeats. I think they conceded 25 goals, if I'm not wrong. 25 goals, if I'm not mistaken. Scored just six goals there. So I think you probably look at that and have that as your benchmark for a Southeast Asian team, and thinking, can we get a win at least? Then can we go from there? Can we better Thailand's point tally of 2 points? And also, I think overall, you think about the performances, what sort of performances they can put in here against some of these big teams, looking beyond results. Of course, they're going to be judged at the end of the day on how they finished the group. People are perhaps not really going to remember the fact that they played really well against Australia, for example, but then still lost the game. So they're only going to look at it in history, and you look at, for me, for example, looking at Thailand's results, you're going to look at Vietnam and think, yeah, you know, could they have done a little bit better in those situations? So if they can pick up a win, absolutely brilliant. If they can better Thailand's tally, I think would be a passing mark, really. And I think it's so important for them as well to make sure that they don't let themselves down in any of these matches. Try and compete as best as they possibly can, and again take on board all these lessons that they will undoubtedly learn throughout this campaign.